In the year 1238, the Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Batu Khan, was an unstoppable force, sweeping through the lands of Russia with terrifying efficiency. Entire cities had already fallen before them, their inhabitants slaughtered, their fortresses reduced to rubble. Cities like Ryazan and Kalamna had been obliterated, their defenders crushed beneath the weight of Mongol brutality. But there was one city on the horizon that would not go down quietly. That city was Kozel'sk, a place that had earned the nickname the Evil City among the Mongols. Kozel'sk was not a large city by the standards of its time, but it was strategically important. Located near the Alka River, it sat in the heart of Russian territory, and its fortified walls were known to be formidable. But it wasn't just the city's defensive structures that made it stand out, it was the unyielding will of its people. Unlike other Russian cities that surrendered without a fight, Kozel'sk was determined to resist. It had become a symbol of defiance, and it would soon be the site of one of the most dramatic defiance stands in Russian history. As the Mongols approached, Batu Khan's army moved with brutal efficiency, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The Mongol hordes had already swept through several Russian cities, each time leaving nothing but fear and destruction. They were accustomed to cities surrendering without putting up much of a fight. The Mongols were known for their speed, their military prowess, and their ability to break down even the most powerful defenses. But as they neared Kozel'sk, they encountered something unexpected, a city that refused to bow to their might. The residents of Kozel'sk were known for their resilience and their fierce independence. They had been exposed to the cruelty of the Mongols before and had witnessed the fall of their neighbors. But the people of Kozel'sk refused to let fear dictate their actions. They made their preparations, knowing that the odds were stacked against them, but with the determination to fight to the last. They were not going to be another easy conquest for Batu Khan. Kozel'sk had become a symbol of defiance against the Mongol invaders, and the people were resolved to make it known that they would fight to protect their homes, families, and land. In the face of the Mongol threat, there was no surrender, no submission. The city's leaders called upon every able-bodied man and woman to stand firm, and those who were unable to fight were tasked with providing whatever support they could. The people of Kozel'sk knew that their city would not survive without sacrifice, but they were willing to make that sacrifice. As the Mongol forces approached, they saw a city that was ready for battle. The walls of Kozel'sk, though not as large as some of the other Russian fortifications, were well defended. The people had fortified the city as best as they could, bracing for the oncoming siege. But it wasn't just the physical defenses that made Kozel'sk stand out, it was the unbreakable spirit of its people. They were prepared to resist with everything they had, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. Batu Khan, who had already taken several Russian cities without much resistance, was eager to move through Kozel'sk quickly. He believed it would be just another easy conquest city to be taken, its people crushed beneath the weight of Mongol might. But as his forces arrived at the gates of the city, they were met with an unexpected sight. There was no panic, no fear, only a silent resolve in the faces of the defenders. Kozel'sk was ready for battle. The Mongols, accustomed to quick victories, were caught off guard by the city's determination. Batu Khan, in his arrogance, underestimated the defenders. He ordered his forces to launch a full-scale assault, confident that the city would fall as quickly as the others had. But what he didn't anticipate was the relentless resistance the city would put up. For days, the Mongols laid siege to the city. Their forces were vast, their tactics ruthless, but Kozel'sk refused to yield. The defenders fought fiercely from behind their walls, hurling stones and arrows at the Mongol soldiers. They were outnumbered, their supplies were dwindling, but the people of Kozel'sk did not waver. They knew that they were fighting not just for survival, but for their very way of life. The Mongols had taken so much already, but Kozel'sk was their line in the sand. This was the final stand. As the siege dragged on, Batu Khan's forces began to grow frustrated. The defenders were not like the others they had encountered. They were not willing to give up their city. Without a fight, Mongols had been known for their ability to crush resistance with speed, but in Kozel'sk, they found a challenge they weren't prepared for. The siege turned into a grueling battle of attrition, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But even as the Mongols brought in more troops and laid waste to the surrounding countryside, the defenders of Kozel'sk held firm. Inside the city, the people knew that their time was running out. Supplies were running low, and the Mongols had begun to cut off any remaining escape routes. Starvation and exhaustion were taking their toll on the defenders, but they refused to surrender. Kozel'sk had become the symbol of Russian resistance, and they would not let it fall quietly. They fought, not for themselves alone, but for every city and village that had already been destroyed by the Mongol horde. The siege of Kozel'sk stretched on for weeks. What had started as a swift Mongol assault was now a war of attrition, a brutal battle that the Mongols were not used to. Batu Khan's army had ravaged countless cities across Russia, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins in their wake. But Kozel'sk had become something more than just a city. It had become a symbol of defiance, a city that would not bow, no matter the cost. The Mongols had never faced resistance like this before. Kozel'sk's defenders were not surrendering, not fleeing to the hills. Instead, they stood firm, utilizing every bit of their training, their environment, and their spirit to resist the Mongol onslaught. They fought fiercely from behind the city's walls, launching arrows, stones, and any available weapon at the approaching Mongol army. For every inch that Batu Khan's forces gained, they paid in blood. The Mongols, known for their ruthless efficiency, had underestimated the tenacity of the people inside Kozel'sk. As the days turned into weeks, the city's food supplies began to dwindle. The Mongols had cut off all escape routes, surrounding the city on all sides. Starvation and disease began to take their toll on the defenders, but there was no sign of surrender. The people of Kozel'sk fought with the ferocity of those who knew that this would be their final stand, and their resolve seemed unshakable. In the midst of the siege, Batu Khan became increasingly frustrated. The resistance at Kozel'sk was costing him men and time, precious resources that he could not afford to waste. His army had grown weary, but he refused to back down. The city would fall, he thought, but it would come at a cost. A brutal cost. We cannot allow this city to defy us, Batu Khan reportedly said to his generals. Kozel'sk will be an example to every other city that dares to resist us. His words echoed the Mongol mentality. Swift, merciless retribution. He was determined to break the will of the defenders and send a clear message to the Russian people. Resistance to Mongol rule would be crushed. After several weeks of intense fighting, Batu Khan ordered the final assault. His army launched an all-out attack, determined to finish what they had started. The Mongols brought in siege weapons, catapults, siege towers, and battering rams to break the walls of the city. The roar of the Mongol war drums echoed across the battlefield as their troops prepared for the decisive strike. On the day of the assault, the sky was dark, and the air was thick with smoke from the fires that had started in the outskirts of Kozel'sk. The Mongols' massive forces moved in, attacking from multiple directions. The defenders, though exhausted, fought with everything they had left, knowing that this was their last chance. Women and children who were unable to fight joined in, supporting the defense with what little they could do. Despite their valiant efforts, the sheer number of the Mongol forces eventually proved overwhelming. As the Mongol siege towers began to breach the walls, Kozel'sk's defenders fought back with everything they had, even resorting to throwing boiling water and stones at the invaders. The defenders' bravery was unmatched, but they were severely outnumbered, and the Mongols were relentless. It wasn't long before the gates of Kozel'sk were breached. The Mongols poured into the city, overwhelming the defenders with their sheer numbers. The final stand was savage. As men, women, and children fought side by side, desperate to protect their homes and their families. The last defenders of Kozel'sk fought in the streets, in the burning buildings, and in the alleys. Every inch of the city became a battleground. In the heart of the chaos, the defenders showed the last vestiges of resistance. Batu Khan's forces, accustomed to crushing cities with speed, were now engaged in a brutal, drawn-out battle. They had expected a quick victory, but the Mongols were now paying the price for underestimating the will of the Kozel'sk defenders. The defenders fought valiantly, refusing to yield even when it seemed there was no hope left. But as the day wore on, it became clear that the battle was lost. Kozel'sk had fallen, but it had taken a heavy toll on the Mongols. Batu Khan's forces, though victorious, had suffered significant casualties. It wasn't just the loss of life that weighed heavily on the Mongol army, it was the shock of facing an enemy that had refused to bow, an enemy that had made the Mongols bleed for every inch of ground. As the last of the defenders were overwhelmed, Batu Khan ordered the city's complete destruction. The buildings of Kozel'sk were set ablaze, and the surviving inhabitants were slaughtered without mercy. The city, once a proud symbol of Russian resistance, was reduced to ash and ruin. But even in its destruction, Kozel'sk had left an indelible mark on the Mongols. The fall of Kozel'sk would be remembered for generations. It would become a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds, a city that had fought for its survival and made the Mongols bleed for their victory. The Mongols had won, but the cost had been higher than Batu Khan had anticipated. Kozel'sk had humbled the Mongol Empire, showing them that even the most powerful forces in the world could be challenged by a city that refused to give up. In the years that followed, the story of Kozel'sk's last stand spread across Russia. The people of Kozel'sk had been wiped out, but their memory lived on in the hearts of those who remembered their bravery, became a rallying cry for Russian resistance, a reminder that no matter how powerful the enemy, there is always room for courage and defiance.